Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this third day of beLAUNCH. I'm very honored to do this, be the moderator for this session. We have here perhaps, or I should say, fact-wise, the top angel in Silicon Valley. And top angel seed investor in Silicon Valley, and also the top angel seed investor in Korea. And it'll be an interesting session because we will be juxtaposing the two markets and the two cultures, and seeing some of the developments in the last just 5 years. And also seeing what might happen in the next 5 years. We'll go Korean government style, set policies every 5 years. And so we're very honored to be the one that will be asking the questions to this very fine gentleman. And I'm going to give a quick introduction on each person, because I don't want their humility to not bring about some of the interesting facts from their profile. I start with Jimmy. Jimmy Rim. Most of Korean entrepreneurs, if not all, know who Jimmy is, and he's the CEO of KCube, which is a fund that he started with Brian Kim, who's the founder and chairman of Kakao, and Brian Kim is the chairman of KCube as well. And his portfolio is very well known. It includes companies like Programs, and he's invested in the past. He's invested in Kinks, which went IPO on the Kosdaq. He and that's two additional companies went IPO. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not as exposed to the Korean market. So, he's invested in multiple companies. Also, in his previous job at SoftBank Ventures, he was a consultant with BCG in a previous life, and also worked for NHN, and got his BS in Industrial Engineering from KAIST. And so let's welcome Jimmy. Then we're really excited about having David Lee here. This is not that the David Lee that the Korean startup community usually knows, who's involved with K-Startup and that is involved with many, he's known as the guy with XG Ventures. He's also involved with SK Telecom. This David Lee is David S. Lee. And so we just wanted to make that clarification. We were discussing during breakfast that there's that confusion, because we were supposed to, it's similar to the confusion that we have with COEX Intercontinental and Grand Intercontinental. We were supposed to meet for breakfast at the Grand, but he was at the COEX and we couldn't find each other. So a similar thing happens with the David Lee. So this is the David Lee from SV Angel. And we were discussing also during breakfast that Korea hasn't had much exposure to David Lee from SV Angel, and also David also, because he usually is with the top brass of Silicon Valley. He usually hangs out with the tech celebrities. He hasn't had the opportunity and time to spend a lot of time with the Korean tech ecosystem. So we wanted to give the opportunity to both sides to meet and mingle. Even this morning we had breakfast with the CEO of Nahm, Chung Se-ju, and it was the first time David heard of Nahm and Chung Se-ju 대표. When we all know who he is, I was saying that he's the Psy of the Korean tech. And So anyway, so just a quick profile on David Lee. He's the founder and managing partner of SV Angel. And prior to that, I guess the venture firm was called Baseline Ventures. And that's actually when we met the first time. And before that, he also was a founding member of Google's new business development. And that's also a reason for the confusion, because the other David Lee also worked at Google. And then he worked at StumbleUpon, which was acquired by eBay. And he was the head of business development there. And his training is, he got a BA at Johns Hopkins, but then he's a lawyer too. He got a JD from NYU. But he's an engineer too. So the perfect combo, and his Master of Science in Electrical Engineering is from Stanford. We Koreans like to talk about education, so that's why I bring up all these degrees. Enough about my talk. We're really excited to have David here. David, by the way, he's a speaker at almost every TechCrunch Disrupt. So what happened this year is that TechCrunch Disrupt happened on the same dates as us. So April 29, 30, May 1st. And so David attended TechCrunch Disrupt. And on May 1st, midnight, he got on the flight and then flew in. So Wednesday night, he flew in and just landed today at 4 a.m. Did you get any sleep? No. Yeah, he went to work out, then had breakfast, and just joined us. So just for that effort alone, let's give him a hand. Yeah. So again, very very excited to have David and Jimmy here. Do you want to give us a quick intro on your side about SV Angel? And anything you want to add about yourself?
No, I think it's, first of all, thank you for having me and for the whole conference, the conference organizers. It's a real honor to be here. I think you covered it well. We invest in early stage startups, primarily software, consumer-oriented software, consumer internet companies, primarily in Silicon Valley, also in New York. And a couple internationally. So it's a real honor to be here.
Great. Thank you. Did I miss anything, Jimmy? And can you also give us because we have some foreign visitors as well who are not familiar with KCubeVentures. So if you can give us a more detailed background on KCubeVentures.
Same here. It's great to be here. It's my honor to be next to David Lee. KCubeVentures is a relatively new VC established last year. As he mentioned, I founded the company, the venture capital, with Brian Kim, who is the chairman of Kakao. Actually, Brian Kim was in Silicon Valley for 2 years, and he saw the startup ecosystem there. He realized that VC is more than money. So he wanted to build an ecosystem here in Korea, and that's how he called me and asked me to be the founder and CEO. Within a year, actually it's within 10 months, we invested quite a lot. We invested in 12 startups, trying to add more value than just money.
Excellent. Thank you for the additional information. So it's a curious kind of chemistry in each of these funds. There's an industry giant involved in these funds as in a significant manner. I'll start with SV Angel. In SV Angel, Ron Conway is known as being involved in the fund, and many times David is asked. Although David is the founder and the main guy at SV Angel, because Ron gets involved in the background at times. Many people ask him. By the way, Ron Conway is known as the godfather of Silicon Valley, the human router. He's just so well connected in Silicon Valley that he's almost like a demigod there. And so people keep asking, how is Ron Conway involved in SV Angel? So I know you've said this story many times, but for the Korean market, which hasn't had this exposure to SV Angel and Ron Conway, can you tell us how he's involved?
Sure. So I met Ron in 2005. It's when I was working at Google in business development. I was working on online video, and he was as interested in online video as I was. Ron's career has spanned since he has been angel investing since 1994, and he decided to focus all of his energy on the internet. And to give you an idea of that, some historical context, at that time, Mark Andreessen was just leaving the University of Illinois. And so through that time...
Just as a quick Mark Andreessen is the founder of Netscape, and then now one of the founding partners of Andreessen Horowitz, which is a top VC. Sorry for interrupting.
Sure. And through that time, he was able to invest in companies like Google, Zappos, and PayPal. And in 2005, I met him, and we developed a relationship and really hit it off, and he became a mentor to me of sorts. And then in 2007, I left Google, went to one startup, and then he asked that we join together and work together. In 2009, I created funds where we would invest based on opportunities that Ron, I, and others saw within our network. And so Ron is an investor in our fund, but he's really an advisor, so he's not a general partner. But he is, as you put it, a godfather of sorts. And so I really lean on him for those situations that require really high-level advice. So he's not involved in the day-to-day or in the investment decisions. Very rarely gets involved with the companies, but when he does get involved, it's at the highest level, and those are the things that only he can do.
I think you or somebody coined the term inflection points. Yeah, and he gets involved in that critical moment, and I think this is a very natural question. It seems to be that in KCubeVentures, Brian Kim, the chairman of Kakao and KCubeVentures, gets involved sort of in a similar way, or is it different?
It's very similar. It happened to be. For those who don't recognize Brian Kim, his Korean name is Kim Bum-soo. He was the co-founder of NHN, one of the two founders of NHN, and then he founded Kakao. So if you think about it, he's the legend in Korean IT. So during the operation of investment, he doesn't really get involved during the investment process. But after we invest, and when the portfolio needs some help, I call him and he reaches out. So if you think about it, he can reach nearly everyone in IT. So that's a tremendous help, I believe. And of course, I often go to him and ask a lot of advices because he has, tremendous know-hows.
So he could be called the godfather or the human router as well of Korean tech.
So because, if you think about it, actually, Korea is much smaller than the US. So I think he can nearly
a younger godfather.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Thank you for that explanation of their roles. Want to move to discussing some of the stories because everybody hears about SV Angel. You do how many deals per week or per month, if I may?
Do about 100 per year.
100 per year. So that works out. If you take 2 weeks off of vacation, that's two deals per week. And how many people do you have?
We have 5 people.
5 people. Wow. Still a lot. Do you automate a lot of the deal term sheets and agreements and stuff?
Well, we frequently co-invest with other investors. You saw Jeff here earlier today. We've co-invested with him and his firm frequently, and so oftentimes they're the ones who they or other investors will draft the agreements, and we'll invest smaller amounts, and that's why we invest in more companies.
Thank you. If it's okay, we'll spend some time discussing some of the legendary stories of SV Angel. Like how did you, for example, get involved in investing in Twitter?
Well, Twitter was an investment when they first started. It was a company that started in about 2006, and so we invested in their first round, and we've been involved with them all the way through, getting close particularly to Jack Dorsey, who was the founder of Twitter, and then also now is the founder of Square. My wife happens to work at Twitter as well. But Square was the one where we really got involved from the very beginning, and where we saw sort of, he showed us the first demo of the product, and his scribbling is now is in the office wall. And what Square does is Square allows anybody to have a phone to instantly accept payments. And it may be hard to imagine here in Korea, but in the US, being able to accept credit cards is a very hard and tedious process. And so what Jack did was he thought everyone should be able to do that, from the person who has an actual store to the person who is just giving a golf lesson or giving a piano lesson or selling their stuff. They should be able to accept a credit card as well as cash. And that's really opened up a whole new sector of the economy when it comes to people transacting in goods and services.
And even the founder of Starbucks is now an investor in Square, and Square is now in every Starbucks in North America, or almost every Starbucks. And you also have a special relationship, or used to have a close relationship with Y Combinator, and invested in some of their companies, namely Dropbox and Airbnb. Can you tell us a little bit about those stories?
Sure. So, we met Drew House, and the company is called Dropbox. It allows anybody to store and access their files. And he talked about the story of when he was in a car with his friends and he forgot his files and he didn't have the little key to access his files. And he thought that this was too hard. Similarly, with Brian Chesky and Airbnb, the reason why it's called Airbnb, in English, B&B is a term for bed and breakfast, which is a type of hotel. And what he did was he took his air mattress and he rented that out, and during a political convention for Obama. And what he tapped into is this idea of renting out your own place for other people to stay. And so that really disrupted the hotel and travel industry. And so both stories and all of the young founders, it usually starts from a place where they're solving a problem for themselves. And there's that very rare case where that problem for themselves extends to the rest of the world.
One last, we can't review how many, if you do. Anyways, we can't review that many, so just a few. The last one, Pinterest. You also invested in them. What's the story behind that?
Well, we met Ben very early on, and Ben is a story. It seems like it's an overnight sensation that took 2.5 years. And I think that is it's a great lesson for founders and startups. Everybody, when you read the story about the startup, it feels like an overnight success. And for some it is, but those are the ones that get written about because those are the unusual ones. But for most startups, most businesses, the first year or two is very hard. It's very tedious. And he's a great example of that, where he kept on, he was very disciplined and very focused in his approach. And sure enough, it happened to work. And so all credit goes to him, and he's somebody who, even now, he's supremely focused on his business and his company.
One last question related to your portfolio companies. Because you invest in every hot Silicon Valley startup that we hear on TechCrunch and all the the Wall Street Journal and the tech media, there are some people who say that you're sort of the index fund of tech startups. Would you agree with that assessment? Yes. If yes, why? If not, why?
No, I think that's a great way of putting it, and it would be sort of disingenuous for me to say those are the companies that we invest in without mentioning all the others that don't turn out to be the next Dropbox or the next Pinterest. Venture capital is a game of if you can get one big company out of 10, then you have done a phenomenal job. And so for every Pinterest that we invest in, there are 10 or even 15 that either go out of business or just return capital. But we do take a different approach to investing. That's a function of working with Ron and working with sort of our resources. And it's a different business model in the same way that Google and Amazon have very different business models. We have a different business model from a traditional venture capital firm. But in the end, we think that both models can be successful.
A question to Jimmy now. Some of the cool companies that you've invested, and KCube, of course, it's relatively speaking, a younger fund, so there's not as many companies naturally. Some of the cool investments that you made, programs, for example. Can you tell us how that happened?
Programs is a unique startup in Korean tech industry, I believe, because they're sort of a tech-based startup rather than consumer internet. The founders there were top-tier engineers, and I mean top-tier, not top-tier in Korea. The top engineers went to global coding competitions like ACM, ICPC, Code Jam, or DEF CON. They won prizes there. So they're like top tier in the world. 5 of them thought about one big problem. Why are all people looking at the same page, first page, whether it's a mobile service or a web service? So they thought that personalization and recommendation should be the next big thing. I just looked at the team members I invested, and they're making real progress. If you think about it, they started with a movie recommendation service. So this is how it works. If you rate like more than 10 movies, then the machine recommends movies, analyzes your taste and recommends the movies, and they're going to expand it to other categories. And another thing that is really interesting is that they have become the really talent magnet. So they started with 5 members. Now they have like 19 engineers, and they're all like world-class engineers. So that's a very interesting story that it's very unique in Korea because most of the Korean startups is more like consumer-based, developing like apps. That's like a little bit more tech company. So that's a very interesting company of our portfolios. Can I say just one more?
Yeah. That was my next question.
Okay. So,
can you introduce us to one more, at least, of your companies that you're really excited about?
Actually, since as you said, we're a relatively very young VC, less than a year, but we have one huge, let's say, success already. There's a company named FinCon. It's a game studio. All the members were from NHN Games. So they were hardcore developers making MMORPGs at NHN. Their past project was called C9. They got recognized and awarded the Korea's Best Award, the grand prize of that. And those key members, I heard that they were quitting NHN and starting a new startup. So I ran into them and asked if you need investment, and they said yes. And I talked with them, and I realized that they're really authentic. So after the first meeting, at the second meeting, I just offered investment. And actually, our admin staff, they helped them incorporate the company. In Korea, if you want to make a company, there are so many procedures. We did that for them, and we invested it. And within 8 months, they made a mobile RPG. And here comes the success story. Their ranking, the top grossing ranking is like top 3 in Korea for months. They were ranked in global top 20 mobile publishers by, Flurry, or anyways, in global research papers. So now they became like a global company within a year. So that's like a huge success, I think.
Thank you for sharing. It sounds like the model of investing and the way you work in your team and with the portfolio companies. In a way, you're benchmarking maybe SV Angel. Was that the case when you were starting the fund that you said, wow, I'm going to benchmark SV Angel, or it just happened to be?
Okay, frankly speaking, last year, September, I met David Lee and I told him, that I benchmarked him. So there were two institutions, investors that I benchmarked. One was SV Angel, because, it was a great success in Silicon Valley. And the other one was Y Combinator. So we're like a mix of those two, because actually SV Angel's approach doesn't work in Korea because we can't invest in 100 companies in Korea. Our talent pool isn't that thick. So I think we can invest around like 10 to 15 per year. So but we get involved very early. That's from SV Angel. And the other part comes from Y Combinator. So we're trying to make like a mafia culture. So for example, a lot of venture capitals have like annual CXO meetings. We have monthly CXO meetings. So all the C-level of our portfolio companies gather together. They share knowledge. They share real detailed knowledge. And what enables that is we don't invest in direct competitors. So they can share their data. They can share, let's say, for example, if I spend 20K in this kind of cost per install marketing, I got this much of download. Like 90% of users didn't really use it. All these kind of gems, they share it. So I think that's bringing a huge value.
Just a classic way, or in terms of day-to-day, how do you get a deal, and how does it go from lead to closing, and how long does it take? Can you give us run us through the process?
Sure. It's very similar to most venture capital firms. We usually get a referral from somebody who, through a friend and through a trusted source. And we have a sort of a framework in our heads of certain areas or sectors that we like or are interested in. So that might be mobile computing, that might be social commerce. And if it's one of those sectors, then it rises to the top of the queue. And then our team reviews it. We try to have 1 or 2 meetings, and then try to decide within 2 weeks, if not sooner. And that, I think, is very important to understand. I think a venture capitalist may take longer because they make fewer investments. We try to act like individuals. Like if you are an individual and you're making an investment, you generally wouldn't spend that much time, as much time as, let's say, a venture capitalist. And so, again, our business model is different. Our approach is a little bit different, but it is very similar on the front end in terms of how we're able to see opportunities.
So 2 weeks to decision and then to closing on average?
2 weeks to decide whether or not we're going to invest, if not sooner, maybe even a week. Yeah.
And from the decision to the signing?
Oh, I mean, I think that's the difference between maybe the U.S. and other countries. In the U.S., the legal system is so sophisticated that if we wanted to sign that day, we could sign that day because the documents and the procedures are so well known.
Jimmy, can you give us light on the Korean
Basically
situation? Yeah.
It's hard to say it's Korean situation, but as for KCube, we're very similar to SV Angels. We try to invest as soon as we can. So that's, as I said, FinCon, we decided to invest at the very first meeting. So it didn't take that long, less than a week. Sometimes it takes like 3 weeks, of course. But the reason that we can do this fast is that out of 12 startups that we invested, 9 startups didn't even have a product. We just looked at the team, talked with them for hours, and realized that they are A players and they were authentic. They are tackling real problems. So then we just invest, even without having a proto. So that's the reason we can do it fast, I think.
Would you invest in a team without a product?
It depends on the sector. I think now, because the tools to develop a product are so accessible and so cheap. So, for example, if somebody was building a mobile application for the phone, unless that founder was a luminary and somebody who had
Jack Dorsey.
like a Jack Dorsey, then you would invest if he was starting, a sundubujigae house, so you invest in anything. So, but if that person doesn't have that track record, then you really need to see the product. And if they don't have the product, then that is a signal that maybe they aren't as resourceful or technical as other founders.
Can you tell us, after investing, the investment decision has been made, I know you're working on finding other investments, but do you also get involved in helping the startups that are now in your portfolio? With having so many, I don't know how you find the time to do it, but do you do it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our model is we only help when the company asks us, and so we don't take board member seats, and we only get involved, and we're strictly try to be advisors. It's very similar to what an attorney might do, or a consultant, in that you or an investment banker, we get involved at hopefully at events or transactions that can really impact the course of the company. It might be a business development transaction, it might be a corporate development, in other words, mergers and acquisitions, and a lot of it is financing. And so I think the companies have learned that to work with us at these inflection points and to leverage us with other investors like Jeff, who may add value in different ways, although they add value in the ways that I described. So because of that, it's almost like an assembly line. For any one period of time, only, let's say, 20 to 30 companies are at one of those points that really need our help. And so that's still a lot of work, but it's not that all 200 need help at the same time.
But you don't charge for helping?
No.
Jimmy, how about you? How do you help the companies?
I think it's really similar. As I said, I benchmark SB Angel, so I also made sort of a principle that I'll only get involved when the portfolio asks me. We don't take BOD seats. But what's slightly different is that our portfolio asks us a lot. So we almost have like bi-weekly meetings on their request. We don't ask them. So we get quite a bit involved. We make referrals. We help them recruit. We get involved in some business developments. But that's, I think, the small part, because I believe that the thing that we can deliver is very limited as an investor. I just want to emphasize a little bit more. I explained before that the network that they have built, because they are expert in different areas. Some are very good at server programming, some are very good at distribution and marketing, some are very good in like UX UI. So they are helping each other. They're having lunch and dinner together. They're even sharing codes sometimes. So I think that's the biggest part of KCube value, I think, rather than ourselves.
Do you see that kind of synergy and collaboration playing out in your portfolio companies too?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the hallmarks of technology in the technology community in Silicon Valley, and it sounds like worldwide, is the collaboration. And people don't view it as if I win, you lose. It's we all try to win and help each other. And I think that's because everybody understands how hard it is. And everybody has a similar struggle in trying to do what they're doing. It's very hard to get millions of people to use your technology and to use it in a way such that you can build a company. And so I think people really appreciate that struggle, and that's why they're so willing to help and work with others.
What are some of the hot sectors that you see coming from Silicon Valley or beyond? And then I guess it will be a similar question to you.
So it's very hard for us. A lot of the trends or a lot of the themes for us when we invest, they're really driven from the founders. And so if we see founders working on a particular area, then that's an area where we'll focus. But I will say that if I think about the big picture, I think that fundamentally the way that particularly the younger generation, I can say that because I'm 43, but the 20-year-olds, the way their worldview is fundamentally different from ours. The way they view consumption of goods and services, the way they view media, their worldview towards institutions, which is much more jaded and skeptical, is very different. And I think if you think that way, and if you think that they're going to consume media in a different way, via Twitter and Facebook instead of the television or their newspaper, then that is a sea change. And so I mentioned Airbnb. That's a fundamentally different way of viewing consumption. The founder of Airbnb talks about the sharing economy or the access economy. In the United States, owning the fastest car is not the goal anymore. It's about having great experiences with your friends. And so those types of trends, whenever we see a young founder working on that, that's where we lean in and we get really excited. And so, and I think that's happening globally. And so for us, that's very exciting.
Yeah, I agree with David. And one thing that I read a lot in TechCrunch or many other global medias is that in Silicon Valley, there's a concept that B2C is over, sort of, and all of the investors are chasing B2B now. I think it's slightly different in Korea because if you think about it, we don't have that many apps or services that have more than 1 million users, other than Naver. So I believe that in mobile it's different. So if you think about like tons of vertical services that Naver has, it's not very suitable to mobile. And I still think that each vertical has some potential. So that's the reason we still look at B2C. Other than consumer internet, nowadays, especially nowadays, we're putting emphasis on technology-based companies. As I said, Programs is tackling the content discovery recommendation. I believe that recommendation and personalization will apply to other areas too. Let's say location-based information. Of course, that has to be personalized, I believe. We also nowadays talk about like contextual and semantic technology and HTML5 a little bit. So those kind of areas are where we're interested. And also for the last part is that we love people who try to solve difficult and big real problems rather than copying Silicon Valley proven services, because it doesn't really work that way, I believe. Just a little bit, I think this might be interesting to David. Last year we had like 15 Pinterest copy sites in Korea. They all died, 15. Because I believe that it's a totally different market. Korea and US has different market, but a lot of young entrepreneurs just thought that they read it on TechCrunch. Pinterest is the hottest company, so if I copy that fast, I'm gonna fly. But if you think about the infrastructure in Korea, Naver dominates almost everything. And if you make a search on Naver, the content comes from Naver. They don't have a destination site like Google does. So that means that you don't have the long tail websites. So you don't have anything to pin. But they didn't realize that. They just copied the service, the functions, and it didn't work. So I would rather ask entrepreneurs to tackle real big problems.
Thank you for the insight. You mentioned Naver, but because Nahm is a sponsor, I wanted to say that Nahm also is a big search engine.
Nahm is
portal.
big word.
And I think this will be probably one of my last questions. When I first met you, David, it was about 5 years ago, and it was because of a company that I was pitching to you. And at that time, I was in LA, and I don't know if it was a real excuse or not, but you said that you don't invest in companies out of Silicon Valley, and that was the case at that point. And I was based in LA. But then a few years later, SV Angel has started investing in companies in New York, as you mentioned before, and other cities. In New York, Foursquare, what are some of the other New York companies?
ZocDoc.
ZocDoc, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, And so my question to you is, it doesn't seem like you have invested a lot overseas, and specifically Korea. Do you think that in 2 years it might be a different story?
I would never say never. I think you mentioned New York. 5 years ago, the number of companies that we invested in New York were 5% of our portfolio. And now that is 25%. And more importantly, the number of companies in the Bay Area, we invest more in San Francisco than in the suburbs. And that may not seem important, but what that tells you is that globally, more people are moving to urban cities. And to me, that indicates, and you'll see a lot of the innovation is coming from urban cities. Square, Twitter, they all started from San Francisco. And so if you believe in a scenario where emerging companies rise, people move into cities, in a lot of ways the mobile phone, because 4 billion people will have one, and the smartphone, it's essentially a computer, a supercomputer in your hand. It essentially makes location somewhat irrelevant. And so I won't be surprised. I can't say, there are other issues related to the structures of investments, other issues that have always been around, and it's not clear whether or not technology will be able to overcome them. But I would not be surprised if in 2 years a good percentage of our portfolio was international. And I also wouldn't be surprised if in the next 2 years the next great technology company comes from a place other than the United States.
So we could possibly foresee SV Angel Korean companies.
Absolutely.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, and
I've made, for the first time, I made a personal investment in a Korean company. I don't know if I can say who it is, but it was for the first time, and it is a story about sort of the universal language of being an entrepreneur. And this is somebody who, I don't speak Korean at all, and this is somebody who showed me his app, explained to me what he was doing, and this is something that I wanted to be a part of. So that's an example of maybe where technology is headed.
That's like the first leg into many more to come.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah, excellent. Similar, back sort of reverse case for KCube Ventures. You seem to have focused in the Korean market, but have recently made an investment in a San Francisco company founded by a Korean American, or a Korean founder. Do you think more of that will happen?
I'm not sure. I can't really say that I'm confident in investing internationally. If I think about it, how could I compete, with David in Silicon Valley? It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. Everybody's going to go to David. So we made 2 investments in Silicon Valley, but actually that was focusing on the team. They were, Korean founders. Of course, got educated in the US, but we knew them very well. We knew the story, so that's the reason we backed them. It's more like that we invested in the people rather than in Silicon Valley. But as David said, nobody knows what will happen. Nowadays, what I have, I just have a feeling that it's getting closer and closer, and maybe we might co-invest. If need matches. For example, this is an assumption. Let's say David is investing in a startup, and that startup wants to expand in Asian market. In that case, maybe we can also co-invest. And that kind of situations might happen more often, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing that already. And with many of our companies, I mean, I talked earlier about the opportunity. I mean, part of the reason why we're so bullish about the future of technology is because the market is 10 times larger than it was in the mid-90s or the early 2000s. And the only reason why it's 10 times larger is because of the international opportunity. And so for a lot of these companies, whether it's Twitter, Airbnb, Foursquare, for them to fulfill their valuations, which we think they will, Pinterest, they need to address the international markets. And so getting partners involved as early as possible is something that's certainly a value add for those companies.
Going back to your point about people moving into cities, and this is actually part of the pitch that Coupang, which is sort of the Groupon of Korea, but they're actually making a killing while Groupon is collapsing. So Coupang's CEO used this argument that if you put together the top 10 cities in the US, and I may have shared this slide with you, if you put together the top 10 cities in the US, and then you put the top 10 cities in Korea all together, and then you add their populations, the aggregate number in Korea surpasses the aggregate number in the US, and that just shows how urban Korea is, and it's proven by the logistical excellence and efficiency in Korea overall.
Yeah, that's an important point. I mean, even though a lot of people are moving to urban cities, a lot of the innovation comes from the density of cities. And so a city like Los Angeles, for example, there are a lot of people, but it doesn't have the same density as a Seoul or a Tokyo or San Francisco. And that sort of human interaction has been a catalyst for innovation for companies like Twitter, Square, and Foursquare.
You know, we started with personal introductions and sort of want to end the conversation with some personal questions too. Jimmy, you know, I'm curious. It seems like you grew up in Korea, or not? But,
yeah.
And
I was totally educated in Korea. Yeah, sure.
And you were totally educated in KAIST here in Korea. But how is your English so good? Yeah. What's the key?
Is it? Okay. I lived in an English-speaking country when I was very, very young. Say, when I was 2 years old. Okay, 2 years old until I was 7, I think. I came back. So during the elementary school, primary school, I came to Korea. So I stayed in Korea for the next 20 years, 20-something years. But I think I'm a little bit fast at, picking up words. So yeah, I think.
It seems like you read a lot.
Yeah, I read a lot, definitely. I read a lot, and thanks to YouTube and all the websites, I listen to a lot of lectures. I think it's great.
Did you always want to be a venture capitalist?
No. I have to tell the truth. Yeah. No, I didn't really imagine that I'm becoming a venture capitalist. So if you think about it, I went to KAIST. This is a very personal story. I thought I was a genius. I thought I was a genius when I was in high school. So I went to KAIST. I wanted to be a great hacker, but after 2 years, I realized that there are some real geniuses that I could not even go nearby. So then I moved to industrial engineering. Then I decided that I should do business. Went to NHN, and I realized that I love IT and internet. But I just thought that maybe I should have some more experience in management. So I moved to Boston Consulting Group to get some experience. Then realized that that wasn't really fancy. It was really bad experience, frankly speaking. Then I realized that I should go back to IT industry. I thought that venture capital is like a mixture of management and IT. And yeah, from that time, that was 2007. So from that time, I became a venture capitalist. But I never thought that I would become a venture capitalist when I was at school.
David, you are of Korean background, right? I just wanted to confirm that.
And you're not going to ask me the language question, right?
No, I'm not going to ask you the language question. But when did you leave Korea? Where did you grow up? Things like that.
Well, I was actually born in Los Angeles.
Oh.
My mom is actually in the audience there. So I'm 43 years old, and I still have my mother to come hear me speak. She even brought some relatives here. So
let's welcome David.
Yeah,
David's
right
family.
There. Yeah.
Oh, there.
So they came in to the United States in 1960s, early 1960s.
Oh, they were one of the first
immigrants. They were the first. I'm going to toot my dad's horn. The first sort of advanced engineering degree at a major American university, UCLA. So I was born there, and then I grew up in Boston. So this is the first time I've been back here since 1999.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's extend a welcome to David. And same question to Jimmy. Did you always obviously not, but when did you decide and how did you decide to become a venture capitalist?
You know, I never really decided it. I think it just sort of happened. And, you know, one of the things that I did want to do, my father was the first entrepreneur that I know and that I knew, and he started his own company. And I knew that growing up that I didn't have the strength or courage to do that myself. And so I wanted to be the person who advised that person to start a company. And that's part of the reason why I went to law school. That's part of the reason why I work for a technology company. And I got very, very lucky in meeting Ron because he and I share the same approach, the same values. And so it just happened. And there was no design planned. And so I feel very, very lucky.
It just happened and the dots connected. Yeah. Don't leave. We now have a Q&A session where we can ask